Okay, while the technical team's working, hello, I'm Graham Howe from Searoc. My aim today is to talk about our experiences in Taiwan and to draw on some kind of broader lessons for working in offshore wind outside the more developed markets that we've got in the UK and Northern Europe. So, somebody gave me a kind of metaphor for this presentation yesterday, which was quite timely. Basically, working in the Taiwanese market is kind of like eating blue cheese. People tell you it's cheese, it looks like cheese, and you bite into it, and it's nothing like cheese. So it's something you think you know, and it really isn't. So that's what we're going to dive into a bit here. To give you a context for us, we've worked on about 35 offshore wind projects around the world. And at the moment in Taiwan, we're on the Formosa 1 project, phase 2, so the power that was started generating and announced yesterday we were engaged with. We're just in the middle of contracting with, actually, the developer's WPD, but we're doing the contracting via a Taiwanese company, because WPD are looking to work with a Taiwanese company in Taiwan. So that's where things get quite interesting. And we also have a contract at the moment to bring a Taiwanese company up to ISO standard for their HSE, so that they can then begin to work with a whole bunch of the international developers that are out there. So we're engaging quite heavily in the market. It dies backwards. Technological problems, there we go. So a couple of things, just points to go into. Standards of best practice. They're currently European, driven by the developers and the key supply chain personnel. So you have people like Yandenal very heavily involved out there, and a whole bunch of people, Fred Olsen. Everybody's bringing in European standards. But at the moment, there's no consistent crossover with local practices, and this is creating issues. So our HSE guy was out there working on the ISO project, and they went, look, come, we'll put you on a boat, we'll show you our metmast. So for a bit of fun, he thought he'd run a proper risk assessment on the vessel before he got on it. It failed on the life jackets. Life jackets weren't self-inflating. They weren't up to standard in European standard. Footwear was not non-slip footwear. So that's just getting on a boat and going out to visit a mast. We've got plenty of gaps. Conflicts with local practices. Yes, there's a PPE law in Taiwan. Doesn't mean it looks like anything like the ones we've been using building farms in Europe. This is consistent for all countries, and I'm going to say the strange thing, as far as we're concerned, the US, France and Asia are all developing regions where they've never built offshore wind farms before. So, moving on to language, culture and tax. This is highly entertaining because you think everybody speaks English, but it's not English. So when we were contracting Yunlin, we had English speakers, we had German English, which was, just vaguely different, but in just enough points that when it comes to liquidated damages of several thousand euros a day, that could count. And then we got to Taiwanese English and all bets are off. There's gaps in the contracting process, so at the moment, as far as I can see with the Taiwanese, they didn't really grasp liabilities and they didn't really grasp liquidated damages. So when we did a back-to-back contract with the Taiwanese, they tried to pass the entire liquidated damages for the contract, including installing radar, communications. They tried to pass that all down to us on the assumption that it would be a completely mirrored contract. So we had to explain to them, we were like, that much, and they were like, that much. And then, of course, in Taiwan, you get a 25% withholding tax for the pleasure of working with the Taiwanese. So where do we fit in as Europeans? I wanted to take this one from the approach of why are countries investing in offshore wind? Why are these, the Taiwanese, the Chinese, why are they going for lovely big feed-in tariffs? Well, firstly, they do need renewable power. There's no doubt about it. The second thing is they're looking to expand their own manufacturing capacity, and I'm going to point at Korea in that one specifically, because the Korean shipbuilding industry is dying, and they're looking for heavy industry to replace. They're then looking to grow their local expertise and create new local industry. But the problem you've got is there is only a handful of Europeans that actually know how to build an offshore wind farm. We're only really building 4 or 5 farms a year. There's just not enough people with the experience to go around. So the result, you get the technical term of it's a shit show, because you get Taiwanese suddenly deciding you cannot use non-Taiwanese vessels to work on a project. Or you get the Belgians deciding, yes, I know we said we'd pay that feed-in tariff, but it was a little too generous, so we're going to take it back again. And the French, and so on. So you begin to see local issues coming up that create problems for developers who went ahead and committed to a project expecting certain revenues. So what we're going to see is the large infrastructure will probably be European. By that I mean basically the Jackups. There's only a limited amount of Jackups that are out there, and if anybody was to go down to Taiwan now, you'll see a fairly heavy presence of the Volvo from Yandenor, because that's where the Merc is going and that's the work they're getting. You have the problem with the Jones Act in the US. Still nobody's solved that. They're basically probably going to be barging stuff out from on vessels to the Jackup barge that will never enter the US waters technically. And somebody was telling me a lovely story today. They were talking to a major developer and they said, what are you going to do? They said, we're going to watch the first one and see what happens. Secondly, so I've said the Jackups will probably be permanently mobilised in the region because you can see a flow from Taiwan to Japan and then to Korea. So there's going to be a good flow of business to keep the Jackups occupied. And the smaller vessels are following what Seawind are doing, and then there's a Japanese company called Tokyo Kaizen that's actually built their own CTV. You're going to be seeing little fleets of smaller vessels, which is what the Taiwanese want anyway, actually resident down there. And promoting a little bit of a shipbuilding industry. Then you get localization of the personnel. So I want to be clear about this. Pretty much every country knows how to build a wind farm, and they know how to build a single structure such as a rig offshore. They're familiar with that, but only the Europeans deal with what we term that big blue wobbly thing in the middle. Like, we're still in the situation which is that the Taiwanese and the Japanese have never tried to build 80 assets offshore in one go, in the sea, in typhoon season. So when you see Ørsted saying we've just got power off Formosa 1, it's kind of typhoon season. That's a major achievement. Short term, what we're seeing is local partners supported by European personnel, so that's happening in Taiwan. We're working with MDS, a local company, to build the radios there because we're not going to build radios in the UK and ship them to Taiwan. And we're dealing with a company called Tausk who are going to generate marine coordinators. Long term, you're going to need true localization. So what we're seeing is the University of Nagasaki will launch a training course for marine coordinators that we're setting up with them, and that will lead to genuine Japanese marine coordinators. There we go, 5 minutes flat. I should shut up now and thank you very much for your attention.